It's time for our class to begin. It's good to see everyone here this morning. If you have your Bibles, turn to the book of Job, and we're in chapter 4 and verse 12, and we're dealing with what? What are we dealing with? I ask you to kind of do some time and get into the passage and tell me how you felt about it. What are we observing there? What's Eliphaz saying? He had a vision. He had a vision, and it takes him 5 verses to describe what it was like. What do? You say you have a dream? Have a vision. But what is he creating there when he says he has a vision? Follow it with me. Verse 12. Now Thane was secretly brought to me like by stealth. It has nothing to do with my consciousness, because he's unconscious. He's unconscious as he can be. And mine ear received a whisper thereof, in thoughts from the vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth on men. I'm so deep in sleep, this has crept up on me. I hear a whisper, I don't hear a sound. There's no sound. Fear came upon me, and trembling, which made all my bones shake. Then a spirit passed before my face, the hair of my flesh stood up. It stood still, and I should not discern the appearance thereof. A form was before my eyes, and there was silence, and I heard a voice saying. Now he's painted the picture. Is he fearful? How do you know he's fearful? There you go. He describes it, doesn't he? Hey, you can say, I'm fearful. That's the poetry. That's what we're getting. And you said, it made the hair of my arm stand up. And you thought that wasn't biblical. You thought that was just you. Eliphaz feels that. What is it? What's his bones doing? They're shaking, aren't they? Bones are shaking, hair standing on end. So you probably say, what I'm about to tell you, it is such a mystery, but it's something that you ought to pay attention to, and we're at rapt attention. Now, how does one who is not, a message is not coming from God, we would call this kind of mysticism. We'd speak, he paints that picture, and I'm going to get all the forms out here that would cause you to be afraid. And I was afraid when I heard this vision, or saw this vision, and tell the story that indeed God is telling me something when in reality it's not God. And yet, in Genesis the 15th chapter, Abraham sees a vision and he was horrified by it in dark. That came from God. So just because he paints this picture, which a mystic and a devil worshiper and one who is trying to trick you would be pointing to paint the same picture, it doesn't mean Eliphaz was not instructed by God at one time. And what is he doing? I'm appealing to my experience, Job. I never saw if you plow the iniquity, you're going to reap the consequences. That's my experience. And so it very well could be his experience. You know, when angels are in the presence of God in Isaiah 6, they put their hands over their mouth. There is indeed this reverence for the glory of God himself. And this very well could be early on. Job lived in an early time of the patriarchs. God may have spoken to him in a vision. And this is reality that's taking place. There's no reason not to believe that. And he speaks the truth. And that's what he's trying to get toward Job. We'll see what that's like. But he paints this picture. I'm in deep sleep. I didn't dream this one up. There's silence, and I hear it's a whispering, but I know it's a voice. And he knows what it's about to say. So he paints that picture of this is something mysterious, but it's the truth, and it must be from God. It must be from God. And there's no reason to doubt that. Our experiences a lot of times finds ourselves saying, that's what God taught back here. Our experiences are connected with truth. So let's perceive it that way and see what he says. And this was the voice what was it saying? Verse 17. Shall mortal man be more just than God? Shall a man be more pure than his maker? A question. We might call it a rhetorical question because there is reality only one good answer, isn't it? What would be your answer? You're not going to be more just than a perfect, holy God. And why do you speak against your maker? And Paul will argue that in Romans. Romans has God having his plan of salvation, and he speaks against, potter has a right over the clay, all of those things. That's truth. And then he goes into some detail. With that thought in mind, look at man, and then where do we go? Behold, he putteth no trust in his servants. Who are these servants? Latter part of verse 18. And his angels, he chargeth them with folly. He put no trust in his servants. Who might be a servant? I'm talking about angelic beings. We're going to go a step higher than man. Because man, in verse 19, how much more then they which dwell in what? Angels don't dwell in that. I'm going a step higher. It's not even angels get by with it. Much more than those who are in houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust. And my experience says they're not greater than what happens to a moth every day between morning and evening, who are crushed as the moth, or before the moth is some bird. Betwixt morning and evening, they are destroyed. Those little creatures, little gnats, little moths, sometimes, they don't last very long. And man, that's what you are. And then they perish forever without any regarding it. Do you miss the moth that you killed the other day? You missed the bug you stepped on the other day? When you're little, you do. That's when you confess your sins to your mother. I stepped on a bug today. But you grow up and realize, no, that's not a big deal to me right now. Got other issues I'm dealing with. And then he speaks about your permanency. You got a tent. It's where you dwell. It's not their tent cord plucked up within them, and they die, and that without wisdom. Man, you're in houses of clay. You're made of the dust. No different than the moth that soon go and they don't have the wisdom. And you're sitting here replying against God. Don't you take that step, Job. Remember, Job has not sinned with his mouth when he went through all these things. But here, after 7 days of quietness, this is the wisdom he gets. Can you see why in verses chapter 6 and 7, he's not impressed? You're speaking the truth, but it's not helping me. It's not speaking to what I'm dealing with, and you're trying to answer my problem. You're trying to deal with me. But it's not working. So he sets forth here what solution in Job's suffering did Eliphaz receive in his vision. So let's begin to see. I've got the vision. He says, call now and see if there are any that will answer thee, to which the holy ones will thou turn. And he begins to say that, who are you going to talk to, Job, about it? It had to be God. And then he kind of lays some groundwork. For vexation killeth the foolish man, and jealousy slayeth the silly one. So is he indicting Job? Not necessarily. He says his experience. Vexation. I'm exasperated. I am hurt. I'm angry. I am speaking out of things, and that could very well fit Job that we're speaking about. And in chapter 6, he will admit it. But that doesn't mean he's sinful. I have seen the foolish taking root, and suddenly I cursed his habitation. He takes root, and I realize I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. I wouldn't want to be in his habitation because they're struck down. Who's behind that? Implication is God brings them down. His children are far from safety, and they are crushed in the gate. I hope he's not being cruel, said Job. Realize this is you? Not necessarily so, But here's what happens in my experience. There's nobody to deliver them. Verse 5, whose harvest the hungry eateth up, and taketh it even out of the thorns. You put thorn hedges up there to keep the animals from your fruit, they reach through there and get it. And someone eats your harvest. Your children are protected in the gates. These are foolish people. These are foolish men. For affliction cometh not from the dust, neither doth trouble spring out of the ground. You don't blame it. You don't blame your troubles because it came out of the dust. But man is born unto trouble as the sparks fly upward. Who creates the sparks flying upward? You created a fire. And he could be saying that this applies to all men, people who are righteous, people who are not. Trouble comes to you. It's not grown out of nature's ground. Or he could be saying, you planted, this is what you're sowing. He can be going, I don't know if he's driving it home, he's being cruel, or he's just talking about his experiences. And we'll give him benefit of the doubt now. These are experiences that said, Job, how do you fit in this? I'm not saying you do. How do you fit into that? But there wasn't, what Eliphaz is saying, it's not something that wasn't without remedy. It wasn't without remedy. And as a fire and things going upward, that's what trouble comes to. So he's offering a solution. And he's telling he's given I want you to listen to my vision, and here's what my experience is, and that'll be true. But as for me, I would seek unto God. Unto God would I commit my cause. You think he's now giving a solution to him? How are you? Knowing this reality out here, not saying that you, but Job, I wouldn't be replying against God. You know, God's behind this. I want you to see that. But God's the solution. Now that's a logical way, godly way of dealing with things. But it's not going to be fitting into Job's situation. That's what's frustrating. That's why this book is the way it is. So what do you learn when he speaks about the fact of commit my cause? What does he do in verse 10? Why should I go to God and commit my cause to him? What does he do in verse 10? He giveth rain, sendeth waters upon the fields. He sets up those that are low, and those that mourn he exalts to safety. What else does he do? He frustrates the devices of the crafty, so that their hands cannot perform their enterprises. Does God overcome the wisdom of the wise, Paul? Didn't Paul argue the same thing? Yeah, it's truth. It's truth. He that taketh the wise in their own craftiness, hundreds of years later, Paul be writing that to the Corinthians. Exalting God, says some marvelous things about God. But what happens, they meet with darkness in the daytime, and they grope at noonday as the night. Man's wisdom, all the things that he thinks are right within himself, turn to God. He has a solution. And he takes people in their craftiness, and I'm not going to take that step, but Joe, that may be you. You think you're so wise in your attitude? You're not dealing with reality. Verse 16, so the poor hath hope, iniquity stoppeth her mouth. Iniquity won't come on you anymore. It doesn't come on the poor because God delivers. So what do you do, Job? What's the solution from your friend Eliphaz? I laid a softball for you. Hit it. David?
Well, he's making assumptions that from his own experience, limited as it's proved to be, that God only punishes the wicked. So he's making a big assumption, which, of course, as we know, at the end of the chapter, God categorically shows that's dead wrong.
That's right.
But in his own limited experience, then he thinks, well, the only thing I've ever seen is people do bad and they get punished.
That's right.
And that's why what they're saying to Job, God later has to show that they're dead wrong.
That's right. So where does he go now, though? What's the next step?
Job, if you're doing all this bad, but I'm assuming you're good, then you're going to have to fess up.
Okay, and see, you'll be happy when you do. Behold, happy is the man whom God doth what? Here's your solution. Put yourself in the place of God. And if you will just turn to God, and what do you have to realize? God's correcting me. I'm not going to speak against my Maker. God is so good. But God is powerful to overcome the wisdom. He's wiser than man. So therefore, despise not thou the chastening of the Almighty. What's happening to you? You're being chastised by God for some sin. And that's my solution for you, Job. Well, we know, does that answer Job's problem? Does that help Job in any way? You know, we'll get into that. But you'll be happy. And he continues with this. We won't read, but let's notice in verse 21. Thou shalt be hid from the scourge of the tongue, neither shalt thou be afraid of destruction that cometh. At destruction and dearth thou shalt laugh, neither shalt thou be afraid of the beast of the earth. What does he mean by thou shalt be in league with the stones of the field, and the beast of the field shall be at peace with thee? Are you going to be a green earth person in our time? We need to be stewards. But see, you'll be at peace with nature. If you're planting vineyards and barley and wheat, who might be your enemy? Stones in the field. What do you have to, in order to cultivate the ground and rocky ground, which is in that time, what would you have to get rid of? Stones. You got stones here being one that you're going to have peace with. When would be the time I don't? And the beasts that might eat up my crops or hurt my children, I'm going to be at peace with them. Because God will bless me in my vineyard. He will bless me in my life. And you're not having that type of relationship right now with God. And He is chastising you. And you know what? In verse 27, lo, we have searched it out. We. Who's we? Me, I'm speaking for the other two as well. We're your friends. Lo, we have searched it out, so it is. Hear it and know it's what? It's for your good. It's for your good. Is that a good friend? If you just took that, telling something that's for your good when you don't want to hear it, what would he call that? We call that friendship. We call that, the enemy won't do that to you. And from their standpoint, we're all involved with this. And that's the cause. It's got to be the cause without saying you're a sinner. You're being chastised for something that's contrary to God. And all this stuff is, listen to the mystery. I've had a vision from God, not about you, but I've had this vision before. That indeed, we're not to reply against God, and He is good, and He will help you if you turn to Him, and it would be for your good. That what we've told you will be for your good if you'll do what? Hear it, hear it. But we don't have Job saying, "I'm a sinner. I'm rash with my words, but I'm not a sinner." At this point, he hasn't sinned, and he's going to now deal with the things that he's having to talk about. Okay, according to Eliphaz, the affliction that suddenly come upon the wicked come by chance. I painted a picture. What would be the answer? No, it comes upon you. They suddenly fall because they are wicked. There is some sin that's taken place. So, question number 10. We want to fill in the blank. Since you have it with you. According to Eliphaz, Job will again be blessed if he will not despise God's what? Chastening. That will take place. Question number 11. Show from chapter 6 that Eliphaz's answers were not sufficient to help Job in his suffering. So now we spend chapter 6. And I'm not saying you have to do this, but it's very helpful to write down how did he respond that says it is not fitting for me, and how did it tells you his attitude toward it. Could you describe it in the terms that Job described it and tell me what it meant? David, you don't have to do that, but you had your hand up. That's right.
We know from our limited experience that the only people who get punished for receive suffering or pursuit, so we know you're lying. Basically, Job said, look, I'm not lying to you.
And in those verses, he welcomes this, doesn't he? He welcomes this examination. Return, I pray you, let there be no injustice. Return to me. Don't turn away from me. I don't agree with you, but don't turn away from me. Yea, return again. My cause is righteous. And verse 30, is there injustice on my tongue? Cannot my taste discern mischievous things? Now, you're cutting to the chase at the end of his reaction of the fact that they have not answered that. But isn't it interesting that we have verses 28 following? What about the rest of the 27 verses? How did he describe these things in a way that we got to understand? Because he will defend himself. And let's just start with chapter 6. And that's true. That point is there, that it didn't help him. He's still righteous. But I want us to see how he leads up to this. Oh, that my vexation were but weighed, and all my calamity laid in the balances, for it would be heavier than the sand of the seas. Therefore have my words been rash. So he admits vexation. But my words being rash is not because I'm going against God, because if he gave me an opportunity to put on the balance what my situation is, it would weigh heavier. It would be better than heavier than what? Sands of the sea. I'm right, and I would outweigh the sands of the sea. Yes, my words have been rash, but I haven't sinned. Then we get to David at the end. He's doing that. Can that which, notice how, and this is my first, it was my answer to it, that his words are tasteless. Your words, yes, you say them, but they don't have the flavor that fits my situation. How does he describe that? For the arrows of the Almighty are within me. I'm feeling God's chastisement. I'm not ignoring him. The poison thereof in my spirit drinketh up. The terrors of God do set themselves in array against me. The terrors of God. You tell me a dream and a vision, and you give me that background, I understand that. In the presence of God, and then being afflicted by him, because he is the power of all things. I realize that. But does the wild donkey bray when he hath grass? No. Or lowest the ox over his fodder? There's no groanings. He's being fed. Something has met the need. Can that which hath no savor be eaten without salt? Or if the taste is like the white of an egg? My soul refuses to touch them. They are loathsome food to me. Your words are tasteless to me. It's like eating the white of an egg. Does he have the same problem you do? You like egg whites? Like it without salt? Tasteless. That's his first observation about their words. I loathe them. Why? They weren't right to the experiences were wrong. No, I'm sure you've experienced all that. And Job could say amen to that. But he's laying out, in the first 3 verses, he lays out his cause for not being sinful, which he will sum up with the idea that, hey, turn to me. I'm not lying to you. And so he'll build his case, and then all of a sudden, he says, your words are not effective to me. That's number 1. Notice how he defends himself again. Oh, that I might have my request, and that God would grant me the thing I long for. And in this context, what does he long for? Huh? Death. That's right. He doesn't long for, I wish an umpire was between us and we could go have judgment. You know, he said, if I had the weights up there, I would outweigh the sands of the sea. I'd be strong, I'd be, purer than that, or heavier than that in that weight. But he wants death. And notice how he describes this. Even that it would please God to crush me. Let him. You say, won't he chastise me? I feel that. But why don't you go ahead and crush me? We've already seen how he felt about that. Just let him loose. That he would let loose his hand and cut me off. But I'm not going to denounce God and die. I'm not going to curse God and die like my wife wants me to do. That's no answer. And he be still, he says, and be it still my consolation, yea, let me exalt in pain that spareth not. My words are rash, but I am in pain, and I'm speaking, that I have not denied the words of the Holy One. He's establishing himself. And then notice what he says. What is my strength that I should wait? And we're going to see the next verse. Is his strength holding up very well? No. What is my strength that I should wait? Because what's my end? Death. Go ahead and cut me loose. Because all the strength that I have, which is waning, is not going to have enough. So just let me let me cut the chase. Let me die, God. And what is mine end that I should be patient? Why should I go through this? I know what my end is, death, and I wish it had just come right now. Notice the beautiful way he expresses that. I got my strength and patience. Those are pretty good characteristics to have as a Christian, as a godly person in the days of the fathers. But it's waning, and I'm not going to probably get out of this. Just go ahead and let me die. Is my strength the strength of stones? Or is my flesh of brass? Is it not that I have no help in me, and that wisdom is driven quite from me? I haven't gotten anything from you, friends. Wisdom, this is for your good. I've just been talking to you. I don't have wisdom yet, because it doesn't fit my situation. He defends himself, and then how does he describe them in verses 14 through 22? What's a one word or a phrase? I'm not going to hold to you. What 3 words? And you give me 2 or whatever. You're not going to do that. What does he describe his friends as being? They're like deceitful brooks. And they can be torrent. The rains are coming, just overflowing. And then they can be so low that when the ice comes over them and the snow covers them, they're not of any benefit. And you know what? Most of the time, they're dry beds. My brethren have dealt deceitfully as a brook, as a channel of brooks that pass away, which are black by reason of the ice wherein the snow hideth itself. What time they wax, it says, what time they wax warm, they vanish. When it is hot, they are consumed out of their place. The caravans that travel by the way of them turn aside, and they go up into the waste and perish. So here are caravans coming, and there's a water bed. There's a bed of water, and we thought it was there last time. And he describes he describes the east, west, and north-south caravans. The caravans from Tema looked. Tema, you had east toward the Persian Gulf. There were trade routes that way. That's your east-west. And then Sheba, he speaks next of the Sheba waited for them. That was in the southern part of Arabia, and it would be the northern route. All those things, there would be these beds that would carry water when there's a torrential rainfall. And they sound good, they look good. But then we're coming upon them, and it may be dry, and they're not there. They were put to shame because they had what? Why were they put to shame? They hoped. They hoped. And what is the moment that they're put to shame? They were hoping. And so we're saved by hope. And why does God tell us, there come the tribulations and the provenness hope. And you will not be shamed if you put your faith in Jesus. Why is that the case? Because it is very cruel. And it's too late when you hope, and you get to the moment that's crucial. And it's not true. He's not there. And that tells me, they're not speaking about that, but I think about that. That's when hope putteth not to shame, because I've got hope the rest of my life. It never puts me to shame. No, the shame is in the pudding. It's in the proof. And what God is saying, you will not be put to shame. I exist. My Savior was sent. He's going to judge all the world. I put my judgment into him. He's going to be doing that. And you will not be ashamed, but you will be ashamed if you don't put your hope in him. And it's like the caravan. The people say, hey, we're going to be hit. Well, there's going to be a water bed here. We'll get some water. And you get up to it, and what's there? Nothing. That's what these words are from his friends. They're like deceitful things. That's what my friends are like. Verse 21, for now ye are nothing. Ye see the terror and are afraid. Did I say, give unto me, or offer a present for me of your substance, or deliver me from the adversary's hand, or redeem me from the hand of the oppressors? He says, you talk to his friends. Now, he could have the attitude, did I tell you to talk to me? Did I ask for your advice? Could you read that with that idea? Did I say, give unto me, or offer a present for me of your substance? Did I ask anything of you? You're pretty good when you spend a whole week and didn't say a word to me. Now you speak. And your words are deceitful, like deceitful brooks. They're tasteless like the white of an egg. And I loathe them without salt. And then verses 24 following, he says, I don't think he's saying, I didn't ask you to talk to me. I think he's saying here, I'm not asking for a miracle. I'm asking for a little compassion. I didn't ask you to deliver me from my oppressor. But you haven't given me any comfort with the words you've said. So teach me, and I will hold my peace, and cause me to understand, therefore, where I've erred. I'm ready to listen. And now we get to where you were, David, right? We get to where you were. I'm not lying. I'm ready to be taught. But your words are tasteless and they're deceitful, because they do not answer when I need it, the water. So we're back to square one. So we notice, question 12, how did Job spend his nights in his affliction? Now we go to chapter 7. This is the last part of his reply. And we go there's not a warfare. Is there not a warfare to man upon earth? Are not his days like the days of a hireling? He's waiting for his wages. The servant that earnestly desireth the shadow, it's a hardship, isn't it? Like the everyday working. When I lie down, I say, when shall I rise? He said, in the night be gone, but I toss and turn. I don't get sleep. And you look at my situation, you say, what is it like to have those boils? My flesh is clothed with what? worms and clouds of dust. My skin closeth up and breaketh out afresh. I scrape them in the dirt, worms, and they open and they close. Oh, my days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and are spent without what? They go by real fast, but I don't have an end to it, and so I'm without hope. I just cut me loose. I don't understand. God's not speaking. Oh, remember that my life is a breath. My eyes shall no more see good. He's depressed? This was what my life has been like. Therefore, in verse 11, therefore I will not refrain my what? My words, you might call it vexation of spirit. My words have been rash. I have admitted that in chapter 6 and verse 3. But I am not being quiet because I know I'm righteous. And I'm not thinking I'm better than anybody else. I'm Job going through a difficulty. And I will not refrain my tongue, and I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. God will hear your complaints. And we can speak to him. He doesn't understand all the things that are happening to him. So we pick up in verse 19. How long wilt thou not look away from me, nor let me alone till I swallow my spittle? That was such an important thing, wasn't it? I have to ask a question about that. What is another way of expressing Job's desire to be left alone? Well, I gave you that, but now explain it. Well, you just wait. When he's an old man, he will be drooling, and let him get to that point in his life. I don't think that's it. What do you think it is? We set our clocks back an hour. That doesn't mean you take it up with silence. Can it be, give me a chance to swallow? You're marking me. You're on top of me. God, you're oppressing me. Can you give me a chance to swallow? I think it was a phrase that was given in order to, because he talks about, my God is you're marking me. I can't get away from you. And then verses 20 and 21, if I have sinned, what do unto thee, O thou watcher of men, who are overseeing men? I'm not saying I'm not under your watchfulness. My friend just told me your chastisement's upon me, and I feel the arrows. He didn't tell me they knew. And why dost thou not pardon my transgression and take away my iniquity? You say, well, Job, you got to repent first. Okay. But he's saying, I haven't done anything. Why don't you just forgive me? And then he says, for now shall I lie down in the dust, and you're not going to find me. Not that God can't find you. The point is, if you don't forgive me now, show me my sins. And if you don't forgive me now, I'm not going to be here much longer. It'll be too late. So we see his vexation. He hasn't gotten to the point where he overpulses the line about his thinking about God. He knows God's in control, but he hasn't done anything against the Holy One. He hasn't sinned, and yet, as David says, that's the accusation of the men. But chapter 6 is so vivid that, yes, they've spoken, and Eliphaz spoke a lot of things about God that are great, that are true. His experiences, no one's arguing with that. And no one's saying, you're just a mystic, you're just making up that vision. No, let's say he had one like that. In his experience, he's had that, God revealing, you don't speak back to God. Who are you to do that? And Eliphaz, I think that'll be helpful right now. And because fools and people who have vexation and angry, they do things that are sinful, Job. And that's been my experience. God brings them down. He'll do you good if you'll just take his chastisement. Well, chastisement for what? There's nothing specific they offer. You see the dilemma? And I think I can see all sides of that. And then getting into how he described it. and realize that, hey, if I'm going to eat the white of the eggs, you give me plenty of salt. Because you can't eat it. They're loathsome if you don't. Because what? Were bird eggs and chicken eggs like that same back then they are now? Tasteless. And you're like a deceitful brook. That might mean anything to us. But sometimes that brook down there, it was going good about last week. It was flowing good. And then what would you have there? What happens? It's gone. So that's what you've done. And I don't have hope in what you have to tell me. So that closes his reply to Eliphaz. Any questions you might have? And next week we'll go into the chapter 8. The next one. Is there something you want to add to what we've discussed?